all you need is if you have a computer and access to the internet, then you can do it. And it's actually really, really exciting once you get into it. So I would definitely encourage any creators out there to try to get involved in, whether it's the metaverse or digital fashion.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of NewForum. NewForum is powered by NewCoin Foundation and is focused on fostering the expansion of decentralized social applications, also known as Social 3.0, by forming an ecosystem and a community of visionaries, creators, and investors.
It provides a safe space for thinkers to communicate, inform, and share ideas in order to ensure the conscious and ethical growth of a new web, embedding the values of care, freedom, and creativity. And on today's episode, we have a super special guest, Ashwini. She's the head of 3D design and production at digital fashion brand Republique. Ashwini is driven by the desire to reinvent fashion using technology by pushing the boundaries between digital and physical. We're going to talk with her about the fashion industry, augmented reality, and how it all plays out in Web3. Thank you for joining us again, Ashwini. We're super honored to have you on today's episode.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's begin by you telling us about your first experience with digital fashion and augmented reality.
So I first began exploring digital fashion when I was at university. And unfortunately, even at the top universities, digital fashion is still not yet part of the core curriculum. And, we only had a couple of small sessions about digital fashion. But I became really fascinated by it. And at the same time, I started working on a software with Microsoft, a fashion production software. And through that as well, my exposure towards fashion technology increased so much that I learned that digital fashion is really going to be huge in the future. In fact, it already is. And so that got me into Clothes 3D and all of these different softwares. And I started experimenting with digital fashion and, everything that you can do with it, and learning about the scope of digital fashion and the fact that it can be used for, manufacturing. It can be used for, the metaverse. It can be used for gaming. There's so many different applications to digital fashion. And as you said, things like augmented virtual reality as well. Those are things I started playing around with. And the amazing thing is a lot of these resources are often free or at a minimal cost when you start off. And there are, YouTube tutorials and things. So yeah, it was a really great way for me to just dive into it as a student without a large investment. And it ended up being my career eventually.
That's amazing. I mean, you are already inspiring me. I keep saying this, and I think it's time for me to get into, into this whole digital fashion, I guess, space, because I studied fashion design. And, of course, with the traditional way, you need a lot of stuff. You need the right table, you need the materials, you need a bunch of tools, you need a space, because it makes a lot of mess, even though in the end you can create beautiful work. And so me personally, I'm not designing at the moment because I don't have the space and I don't have access to the resources to do that. But like you said, digital fashion makes it possible. And, I'm super inspired to get back to designing through that, through that way. And so thanks for sharing that with us. And I'm sure other designers like myself, are more and more seeing the possibilities, with digital fashion. So that's really great. And of course, I didn't learn about that in school at all, so it's an exciting space to explore. So thanks for sharing that.
I'm wondering, Ashwini, do you, so you went to fashion school also in the traditional way, and then you were getting into the space, or how does your transition went kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was studying traditional pattern cutting and, draping and designing and making clothes and all of these things. And it was, I think, around my second year that, like I said, I started working, again, it was on pattern cutting, but I started looking at how to digitize zero waste pattern cutting methods. And then I got to collaborate with Microsoft on that. And that opened up a whole new world to me, because even though I was working on traditional fashion, I was learning about technology at the same time. And I was learning about, the different applications of technology. And I was becoming interested in technology for the first time in my life. And because of that, I started exploring this, and I joined something called the Digital Maker Collective, which is a UAL collective. It's just a voluntary collective that anyone can join, any UAL student, staff, or alumni. And together, it was very cross-disciplinary. There were people who were studying architecture and spatial design, or immersive theater, or fine art, and everyone was coming together and seeing how digital medias can be used to, complement their work. And I became part of that collective and really learned so much from that as well about, how I can collaborate with other designers and use digital platforms for fashion. And so that was kind of my trajectory into the digital fashion space. And then when my final year came, it was COVID, right? We couldn't go into university, and everybody else did still go ahead and make physical collections. But, well, first of all, I'd become really interested in digital fashion and the potential of digital fashion. I thought, this is the future. This is what I want to do. And secondly, a part of me was also, I was afraid to go into uni during COVID times and kind of use the infrastructure, even if it was limited. And I just felt safer staying at home and working on my laptop, where you don't need any resources, right? And so I decided to make a fully digital fashion collection. Thankfully, my course leader was super supportive, and I was the first person at LCF ever to make a fully digital collection for their final year. And yeah, that taught me so much, because my peers were doing things physically, and I was doing the exact same thing because I did have to meet all of the requirements to pass my course. So I was doing my sketchbook, draping, every single thing digitally, which was an amazing experience. I learned so much through that.
That's really amazing that they also supported that, that you stepped into that technology, because, for them, it's probably also very new, and they don't know, okay, how are we going to grade this, or how is this comparable to what we teach physically? But it's nice to see that they're embracing technology. And I read an interview with you where you said, so many people think that STEM is boring, but I want to show that that it can be applied to any field, even fashion, and then it can actually be very exciting. I really like that. And maybe let's dive a bit deep on that. Like, what got you excited then about tech, or about that kind of space?
So I was actually exposed to tech quite early on, because a lot of my family, friends, everyone's in tech. I grew up in Bangalore, it's like the Silicon Valley of the East. Every single person you meet is an engineer. And so for me, like growing up, tech is actually something that I was almost, unfortunately, repulsed by, because it was like, oh, that's boring. That's what everyone does. Like, I don't know what they actually do. They just sit in front of a laptop all day. There's nothing exciting about that, which is why I wanted to do fashion, because I thought, oh, it's going to be so cool and fun and so different. I'm going to be on the runway, like with my clothes. And then I got to fashion school, and then I started learning about, as I said, the applications of technology, which is something that I think people don't look at early on. They just look at technology as like, oh, coding or maths or things like that, when really the applications are super, super exciting. And the applications are, especially in today's world, every single industry uses tech in so many exciting and really innovative ways. Actually, I think understanding those applications is really key to understanding whether it's for you or not, whether you want to be part of tech or not, because yeah, I think most of the workforce today is going to have to be part of tech in some way or the other, and they're going to find it interesting in some way or the other.
Right. And, we talk a lot about Web3 kind of like evolving, like that the creative industry is kind of evolving into Web3. And maybe what do you see is the opportunity for young designers and for young creatives to get into like the tech world and to the Web3 space?
I mean, it's huge, obviously, because of it being so decentralized, and it's not, a monopoly where, today on social media and things, it's difficult because there's a monopoly there. You don't have control over your content. You don't have control over, who is seeing your content and how many people you're reaching and all of these different things. And that can be really frustrating as a young creative. So I think Web3 is really going to help with that. I mean, even if you just look at, NFTs and things, obviously they bring a lot of freedom. But without that complete Web3, do they really bring complete freedom? Because if you look at some of the platforms that sell NFTs, they're exclusive platforms where only certain creators are invited to put their content on there. And how are these creators judged, right? How do they get that invite? A lot of them are, based on their popularity on social media. And again, who controls that popularity? It's that centralized, monopoly of like Meta or whatever big company that controls that. And so even when you think that, maybe the NFT space is less biased and things like that, without that complete Web3, it really is still quite biased. And so, yeah, I think like a complete Web3, which is what I believe we're moving towards, can be a huge enabler for young people to really be able to reach their potential without these kind of these barriers due to massive capitalism. Yeah.
So it looks like we're at like, what do you say, maybe Web 2.5? We're not exactly, fully.
Yeah, sure feels like
right,
it.
kind of, yeah. But yeah, I mean, you're touching on a lot of like amazing points. And I think that, in the end, we want people to be, or we want creators, or let's just say, I guess, fashion designers to be valued for, for the work that they make, and what sort of like, what's the measure for that, and I think that Web3 hopefully solves this issue. And so you spoke a bit about the pandemic, and I'm kind of wondering, like, it did affect the fashion industry in so many ways. And how did it how did it do it for you? What changed? What do you feel changed in particular for you as a designer? Aside the fact that it kind of like pushed you further into like the digital technology like world, what else would you say it did? How did it impact you?
Well, first of all, I think on a personal level, it really made me kind of think about the privilege that I have of, compared to, there were, all of these factory workers and people working in fashion, but in the lower tiers, in, developing countries, in my own country, in India, people who weren't being paid for ages, and people who were, in spaces where they were catching these infections and like catching COVID really easily and quickly, and they didn't have, healthcare resources, they didn't have money, they're the people making our clothes. So that was really kind of a bit of a sad but really realistic thing to realize, that really came to light, I think, and a lot of people started thinking more about the issue, the social issue of fashion. On the other hand, it also showed, I think it made it clearer to me that digital is the future, because with all of the different brands that we saw, it was the brands that already have the most amount of digitization within their supply chains that did the best and actually survived the pandemic, the ones who were able to innovate quickly, the ones who were able to kind of keep track of things without traveling across the world. They were the ones who were least disrupted. So I think, even if not for COVID, I think it would have taken us a lot longer to realize it, even though it is still true. But I think because of COVID, we've realized much more quickly that digital is the way forward, and it's the only way forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it definitely disrupts the supply chain, system. And I think that, this concept of sustainability is very important. And I think at least the friends that, when I have conversations with my friends and we talk about digital fashion, most of them are still in the like super traditional mindset. And it's, this whole idea of Web3 or technology is still so foreign to them, because, most designers, or I say fashion designers, are more excited about the aesthetic side of things, and they just don't want to deal with technology or whatnot. But I noticed that whenever this conversation about sustainability and obviously, like you said, people in these sweatshops being exploited, and this sort of like it sort of helps solve these type of issues. I mean, it can't solve everything, but to some extent I think that it's doing a lot of good, and sometimes people also struggle with the concept of digital clothes. Like, am I gonna wear that? Like, who cares about that, And so I think in the end, like, the concept of phygital kind of does it for me, because we're biological people and we care about touching, and also fashion has a functional aspect to it. It's not about just looking cute, but it keeps you warm and whatnot. So I think that this balance is very important. So on that note, do you see a future where we're like all wearing digital clothes?
Yeah, definitely. I would say so. I know that most people are really skeptical about it because, when I tell people the work that I do, most of the looks I get are like, oh, what kind of pointless work do you do? Like maybe you should do something better with your life, I mean, literally that is the look that I get. But it's just a question of time because every single big step like this is met with a lot of skepticism. That's just how it always is. And digital fashion, to me, it makes sense, right? Like you can't go back in time and really say, obviously we need to look at consumerism differently, but you can't really go back in time and say, oh, like we're gonna have only like one outfit that we're gonna wear every single day for the rest of our lives, right? Like we're gonna be that sustainable. Like, I mean, the world has moved forward and fashion has moved forward, and people love wearing like lots of new clothes and different things. And we can't go back on that. I think the way forward is to find a more sustainable way to do that, which, digital fashion is perfect for that. I mean, exactly as you said, like obviously physical fashion will continue to exist, will continue to thrive, but hopefully in a more sustainable way. But digital fashion, my hope for it in the future, at least, is that it'll help reduce the overconsumption in physical fashion today. So, because digital fashion exists, we'll be able to make more sustainable physical fashion choices. And yeah, it's definitely going to be big. And it's kind of like with Snapchat face filters or with Instagram face filters, right? Like at one point in time, it might have seemed very like, oh, that's so fake if you're making your face look different on social media and things like that. But everyone uses it today. And I think it's the same with clothes. It's just a question of time before it becomes mainstream and becomes popular.
So Ashwini, you touched on a lot of great points that can be solved within the fashion industry. And there are like kind of new concepts popping out of this Web3 space. For example, where to earn, also the connection with the gaming industry. And I want to ask you, what do you think is the potential of like the NFT and social tokens and these kind of concepts? What do you think can that bring to fashion?
So first of all, in terms of, the creator economy, it can actually definitely enable a lot more people who have a talent and interest in the space to go out there and, make a living out of it or make some money out of it. And rather than, as you said, it's very difficult to have a physical studio and make clothes and things like that. Whereas here, you're able to do that just with your laptop. So it would enable a lot more people to get into that space and to be able to share their creativity, which I think is amazing. And the other big thing is, I think within fashion and the metaverse and things, to have truly a kind of connected omnichannel metaverse for fashion, which is, the essential, technically the definition of metaverse, which is a fully connected channel across different platforms. To have that for fashion, I think Web3 is essential, because to be able to have a digital wardrobe that you can take with you to every platform that you go to is the only way that digital fashion is actually going to make sense, because you're not going to buy a dress to wear that you can only wear to one person's house, that, if you go to anyone else's house, sorry, you can't wear that dress, right? And so that way, I think that's really, really important. And Web3 is going to take fashion in the metaverse to a different level and make it so much more relevant.
I'm also like curious to know, like, what is it that you like the most about creating like augmented reality, and like what are the dangers, you would say?
So I think the most exciting thing is that there are no like limits for it. You can do anything there. You have no boundaries or barriers. I mean, you can create, clothes out of water, or you can do the most crazy things, like anything. It's the only limitation is your imagination, which is absolutely incredible. And you're doing it with, such little impact that you're able to really experiment and kind of see what you want to do. And yeah, it's just such a great place to be creating for a creator. And for someone who's creative, it's an exciting option. But I think the negative thing is that obviously with social media, pushing certain, like, this is how you're supposed to look, this is what you're supposed to wear. You're supposed to wear a new outfit every time. Like with digital fashion as well, there is the fear of that, of it kind of pushing that message of like, oh, you're not allowed to wear an outfit more than once and things like that. And even if it's digital, I think that mindset still needs to change. And we do have to move away from a consumerist mindset, because it can obviously translate to physical overconsumption as well. So I think there is always a fear of that. And I think when you're doing this, you just have to be mindful that you're sending across the right message, and you're sending across the message that you're doing this for sustainability and because you're excited as a creative to wear something new or to create something new, but that it's not a message of overconsumption.
That's a good point. Yeah, thank you for highlighting that.
We talked a bit about brands kind of in the pandemic and having to kind of adapt. So I'm wondering, what is your take on maybe brands venturing into Web3? And also, I feel like Web3 has been such an opportunity for young brands and designers to say, you know what, we're going to take this opportunity to make a digital house, or really have the advantage that we know these technologies that the brands might not know. So I'm wondering, what is your take and how they're gonna, I mean, we already see them adapt, but what do you think about them adapting, or maybe some of them keeping it more traditional? Like, where do you see brands thrive in Web3?
So I think the young brands, as you said, the young brands with the young designers who are innovative, who are tech savvy, they're already doing a lot. They're the ones pushing the barriers. They're the ones who are doing new things every day and kind of pushing, Web3 and NFTs and all of these different things. It is the kind of bigger fashion brands, the more traditional ones, that are maybe struggling to keep up. It's only the ones that are really pouring investment into it that are able to keep up. The rest of them are still quite slow and hesitant and things like that. But I think eventually everyone is going to get into it. I think there is not going to be almost anyone who is completely physical without exploring that digital space, because there's just, you kind of have to have a digital presence. I mean, even with social media, right? At one point, it was only a few brands and like the more niche brands, the more cool brands that had social media. And today, everyone, like the seamstress down the street, has a social media, right? And that's how it's going to be with digital and the metaverse and things as well. Everyone's going to have their digital store online and a virtual reality platform and things. It's just a question of how, especially with these traditional companies, with how they use their brand and kind of like rebrand it to include the digital as well, because that can be tricky for certain companies who are not really known for being innovative and out there in digital and for the young customer. So I think for them, it's going to take a bit longer to really figure out a way to make that work for their branding strategy and everything. But I think, yeah, it's definitely going to happen. They just need to invest in the right talent to be able to do that.
Quickly adding to that, I personally can't wait to see what the next generation of designers are coming up with. When we really are more into the space, like what kind of creative ideas and like with augmented reality and all these things can come up. I think it's a very interesting and new and fun space to look at. Yeah.
And I was going to say, I mean, like Joyce said, I think we've already started seeing the diversity. Like when I go on Twitter, I think mostly everything is happening on there in terms of like digital fashion and what's, happening in this space. I see a lot of amazing, digital designs and, people from all over, like some projects from designers in Nigeria, in India, in different countries. And you can already see that it's sort of brought this diversity even within the NFT market, and this is something we didn't see a lot, especially, back in the times when everything was like Fashion Week and, obviously not everybody could get access to that, and so it seems so far away, but now you can display your work, obviously, as long as you have access to, a computer, internet, like those are also factors we have to think about. But generally, if you have access to this, then you can be part of the community. You can also be able to gain value for your work, regardless of where you're located and where you are. And for me, I think personally, that's what I really appreciate about Web3, because, I really care about inclusivity and diversity. And I think it's definitely allowing this to happen. And circling back to when you were sort of, when I asked about this concept of people wearing digital fashion, so like this concept of phygital, you said something about there can't be, I guess, digital fashion without the metaverse. And that's definitely true, because that's the world we're going to be expressing our amazing digital, I guess, clothing and also the gaming industry and whatnot. But aside all these amazing possibilities, like, what do you see, the potential unintended like consequence, because with everything, there's also that we can't just be, painting everything with glitter, we have to also try to touch on the other side of things. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the biggest, probably most obvious negative consequence that I'm worried about, that unfortunately a lot of people kind of high up are not really talking about as much, is the carbon footprint of blockchain in general, and the fact that it has such a large carbon footprint, bigger than many countries already. At a point when we need to be reducing our carbon footprint drastically, this is not the best time to be increasing our carbon footprint due to blockchain. And while there are slowly ways to work around it, and proof of stake is becoming more common and things like that, it is still it's not a complete solution. I think working towards that is so important before we suddenly have this other massive problem that we've created, and then we're trying to fix that. We're just kind of what happened with fashion in a way, right? With the Industrial Revolution, suddenly we have this massive problem of fast fashion. We're trying to fix that. So I think it's important to learn from that and be mindful, and try to find solutions really early on before we scale it to a level where it's impossible to find a solution.
That's a great point. And definitely is something that, at our foundation, NewCoin Foundation, we're working tirelessly, to find the most sustainable ways, to solve these issues. So it's good that you touched on it.
I was just thinking when I joined NewCoin, that I thought they explained to me that they have all of these computers, and that there's a gas fee, and I just didn't know anything about crypto or about tech, and I was like, wait, what do you mean? Yeah. And they're like, yeah, you have these miners with all these computers, and they're obviously it's using a lot of energy. And then in my mind at first was like, okay, that's the unsustainable part right here, and luckily we are moving away from that, and we are trying to find more sustainable ways, like with proof of creativity, proof of work, kind of, and so that was just like, for somebody who doesn't know that, and they might not see it, the unintended consequences with that, regarding, you think, oh, you're doing a good thing because you're not buying clothes, but then you're buying NFTs, or you're making your own. But also be aware of like where you have your NFTs, and I think that's going to become very important for fashion brands, where they have their NFTs. Is it like sustainable? What is the footprint? And
and I mean, at the moment, there's a lot of speculation, I think, and we're still figuring a lot of things out. And so, it's kind of hard to say, but I think that this is why we're having this conversation. And this is why, I'm part of NewCoin Foundation, because, we care about all these things and all these possibilities, and we want to be part of the solution, and having these type of conversations with you and other guests that we've had, and sort of like processing these type of sort of like potential solutions and whatnot, I think is amazing, because somebody will watch this episode and see, what's really happening, and be able to also sort of like bring their own perspective and be part of the solution, and not add on to the problem. And so this is what, we're hoping. And and I'm curious, are you currently located in India, or?
I'm located in the UK right now.
In the UK, because I'm always like excited when people from like, we would call it the emerging market, I get so excited when I'm having conversations with them, because I think you're going to be such a role model for a lot of young, designers in India, and so that's exciting. And sometimes I get worried about like the masses, and if we go full on technology, what's going to happen to the masses, right? But then you said something that gave me some peace. You said that even with social media before, not just everybody had access to it, but now your seamstress down the road, has an account, and I think you're right. And so with time, everybody will be part of this space, and we're looking forward to that.
So yeah, I have another question for you, Ashwini, and that is, what do you think is your role as a fashion designer, or what do you see your purpose in? Like, what kind of footstep or what kind of mark do you personally want to make? You know, I think it's always a quite interesting thing, because when you are a designer, you have different, like you have your journey as a designer, kind of, you know, and I'm wondering, like, what is something that you would love to kind of leave a mark on?
Ooh, okay, that's a very interesting question. I mean, I think it's definitely there's no one answer probably, because things keep, you know, what I wanted to do 1 year ago was very different from what I'm doing now, and it keeps changing. And especially with, you know, something this new, the market and the space itself is changing constantly. So you have to keep evolving with what's happening and figuring out your role within that entire space. But that said, I think a kind of generic answer would be that I definitely want to help bring fashion to the metaverse in an interesting, innovative way, such that it's really able to reach everyone. You know, specific to each company, for instance, because, you know, everyone has a different kind of customer. Not everyone's customer is, you know, the cool 15-year-old gamer. So how can you get, you know, the woman in her 60s who loves floral skirts onto the metaverse? How can you get her excited about this? So that's something I find really, really interesting, and something that I hope to be able to contribute to.
Amazing. Yeah, love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that too. I feel like it still kind of goes around this idea of inclusivity, and I definitely love that. Before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience, like maybe a key takeaway, or like any last few words you want to leave with the listeners?
Okay, well, I'd say to any of the creators out there, people who may not be into digital yet, I'd say, you know, get out there and experiment, because like 2 years ago, I didn't know anything. And it's really that easy to get into it, right? It's all you need is, if you have a computer and access to the internet, then you can do it. And it's actually really, really exciting once you get into it. So I would definitely encourage any creators out there to try to get involved in, you know, whether it's the metaverse or digital fashion or Web3 or whatever else it may be. And at the same time, for anyone who is already involved, and for the new people who might get involved, I'd also say, like, you know, keep in mind all of the consequences of what you're doing whenever you're doing it. You know, try not to make, you know, the metaverse a marketing tool for something unsustainable, for instance. You know, just keep in mind that your values still do matter within the metaverse, within the digital space, and yeah, that it's the future. So we need to create a sustainable future digitally as well.
Well said. Thank you so much, Ashwini. Definitely, I have been inspired again by you. And so I have a computer and I have access to the internet. So I need to get my digital fashion game on. So thank you again. And I'm wondering where our listeners can find you on your social media.
So you can find me on Instagram at A for Ashwini, AFORASHWINI. And the same thing on Twitter as well. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn as Ashwini Deshpande.
And we will put all your information in the description. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all for being part of today's forum. And if you guys want to get more involved also in our community, make sure to follow us on all our social media platforms. We have Twitter and IG. We have NewForum and newcoin.nco, and our website is newcoin.org. And you can also join our private Telegram group. We will leave all of the links down in the bio, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you guys so much. Thank you, Ashwini, for taking the time. You know, love the conversation with you, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do on the metaverse.
Oh, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a wonderful conversation.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ashwini. Have a great day, and we'll see you all next time.